Okay. So basically tonight we're going to be talking about kind of the path to college for 9th and 10th grade. This isn't really the point in which you have to worry about applications or anything like that, but just things to help you prepare along the way. I'll talk a little bit about a 4-year plan at PCS, whether or not you may or may not want to take standardized testing, talk about different activities that your student can try, including in the summer, whether or not they want to work or do a summer program or take classes, and talk a little bit about studying and time management. Okay, so this is basically the common 4-year plan for a student at PCS. They have to have 220 credits to graduate and have to take a minimum of 5 AP classes, but many PCS students take well beyond that, sometimes 10 or more. But that's usually students are somewhere between 6 and 9 APs. The APs that are required are AP World History, AP US History, AP English Language, or AP English Literature, and then an AP Science, and then an AP elective of their choice. So, for example, we have English 9th 10th. They have the option to do AP English Literature or AP English Language and AP or American Literature Honors in 11th grade, and then AP English Literature in 12th grade. Unlike a lot of high schools nearby, we actually have history for freshman year, so medieval war history, and then the 2 required APs, and then students usually select some sort of elective for their senior year. We also have AP American Government and Constitutional Law, which are 2 semester classes that students can take as seniors, but it's not necessarily something that's required. Students have to take 3 years of a foreign language. That can look like a student, for example, starting their language in 7th grade or 8th grade. And then you may, for example, some students may just have the 3rd level of their foreign language in 9th grade and then stop taking foreign language from there. So it doesn't have to be 3 classes in high school. It just has to be up to the 3rd level. Next, we have math. So usually PCS students are prepared to be in Calculus BC by the time they're in their senior year, but some students do choose to skip ahead, particularly at geometry, and then they can take multivariable calculus their senior year. Another requirement for science, PCS has moved away from requiring AP biology, and we've moved from a physics first curriculum to a biology first. So that would be biology, chemistry, AP Physics 1, which is the introductory physics class at PCS. We're no longer having conceptual physics. And then usually that AP Physics, that'll fulfill the AP Science requirement. And oftentimes students take more than 1 AP Science. So they're either taking AP Environmental or AP Chem or AP Bio as elective in their senior year. And finally, there's the art requirement, which is 3 years in high school. So not like the foreign language requirement where it's 3rd level, you have to take actually 3 classes. Okay, any questions? Should I just move on?
I want to say one thing, if I may, Maiya.
Sure.
For all you 9th and 10th grade parents, I've made a 4-year plan for all of your students, and it is in their Google school email address, and it's if they ever want to search for it, and if you want to have them search so they can show it to you, it's the title of it is their last name and their first initial. So if it were me, the title of the document would be Harrison T. So they just have to search in their Google Docs for that.
Yes. Okay. Standardized testing, I know, is something on a lot of people's minds, especially since the pandemic. There's been major changes in the UCs. So, for example, the UCs are currently test blind, and they are moving forward with that policy. So they won't be bringing back the requirement of the SAT and the ACT. And even if you do submit your scores, they will not look at them. for admission. The most that they will do is that they will take your test scores and use it for placement once you do actually enroll there. And so they've made kind of their stance. This Cal State system is kind of unique because they usually just did the GPA and grades and test scores, but now they just have grades because the Cal States nor the UCs are using test scores at the moment. And the Cal State system has not announced what their plan is moving forward after this school year. Private and out-of-state colleges, a lot of them have not announced what they're going to do for the class of 2023 and beyond. They were test optional for class 2021 and 22, but I don't know what's going on there, just kind of dragging their feet on letting everybody know what the future will hold in terms of their requirements. But currently, a lot of colleges are test optional, meaning that they will look at your test scores if you do submit them. Okay, anything to add, Todd?
No, this is definitely not my realm. This one's all you.
Okay. So there's some things to think about in thinking about future testing plans. So would the college that you're applying to require test scores? So for example, students who are interested in applying to Georgia Tech, Georgia Tech has already implemented their policy where they are requiring test scores again. That's kind of the exception. In general, most colleges are test optional this year. Another thing to think about is, are you a strong test taker? And for this, that's why I strongly recommend taking the PSAT in 10th grade as well as 11th grade. The PSA 10 is just kind of practice. Nobody sees those scores. It's just a way for you to kind of see how you feel about testing. And then in 11th grade, it is the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Exam. So if you score high in 11th grade, then you'll be considered as a National Merit Scholar if you score a certain threshold. And that gives you access to scholarships. Some schools do give full rides to National Merit Scholars. Some schools just give as little as maybe $2,000 scholarship. It depends based on the school. If you think about maybe your GPA wasn't as strong and you have high test scores, that's something that can possibly help your application. But if on the other hand, say you have like a 3.8, but your SAT score may be like 1,000, maybe you may want to consider applying test optional if your score isn't in the middle 50% range for the school that you're applying to or higher. So either in the middle 50% or in the 75th percentile in terms of average test scores. And then it's also good to think about the opportunity costs of preparing for an exam. Is this something that you do want to dedicate a lot of time to, or do you want to dedicate time to community service or take a more rigorous course load or doing a capstone project? So standardized testing is definitely at this point kind of a personal choice. We'll see what the private colleges and out-of-state public schools decide.
And one thing PCS does offer is free standardized test prep classes. We usually have two instructors that do, one does the math and then the other one does the English. And those are typically offered in the fall. So for you sophomore families, you want to be thinking about if your kids are going to be doing those, taking these standardized tests, they want to be keeping their ears open next fall for the test prep classes that typically happen after school. And then they do mock tests, practice tests on a Saturday. So just something to keep in mind for next year.
Yeah. I really hope we get many more students to take the PSAT in 10th grade and 11th grade next year. So a lot of students come to me and ask, okay, what type of classes do I take? Or they come to Mr. Harrison and ask, I want to be a doctor, engineer, an artist, a lawyer, and what kind of classes should I take for that? So here are some of the suggestions for a doctor: AP Bio, AP Chem, AP Calculus, AP Statistics, as well as, if at all possible, getting like a research opportunity. I know some students work with UC Santa Cruz professors when they can. I know opportunities are somewhat limited due to COVID, so students aren't able to volunteer at hospitals like they once were. But still, put in those hours of service. And students, to be doctors, usually they have to be very strong in, sorry, okay, sorry. Usually students have to be really good in essentially all subjects. It's very academically competitive to be a doctor. Another pathway for students who really know that they want to be a doctor coming from high school is a BS-MD program. So that is a program where usually you apply it from high school. Some cases you apply once you're already there at a university, and you usually do your degree, usually in biology or chemistry. You get a certain GPA, and then you can go directly to a certain medical school. Sometimes the medical school will be at that university, or sometimes it's at another university that they have a deal with. And some of those programs, usually it's 4.0 students are close applying to some of those programs, but it is another option available if your student is very dedicated to being a doctor. Otherwise, the usual path is just to usually major in a science, though students don't have to major in a science. It's just easier because of the prerequisites required for medical school. And for engineering, many students at PCS are interested in engineering. It's recommended that they take, AP Physics, Calculus, Multivariable Calculus, if they're at that level, Computer Science as well. And one thing I don't have on here is that, especially for students who also want to be doctors and or engineers, is that they continue on in math if they finish multivariable calculus, say in their sophomore or junior year. It's fairly easy to take a class at Cabrillo and linear algebra and continue on with your math studies to make your application a little bit stronger if you have that opportunity to do so. A lot of the students who are interested in engineering, they take design and engineering. Sometimes they'll do capstone projects, or they'll usually join something like a robotics team. Because I know some students right now, I think they're doing underwater robotics. So programming their robot to move in underwater situations. Okay, and in terms of arts, PCS gives students the opportunity to take a lot of art courses, but a lot of the arts students are interested in, studio art, AP music theory, which is a quite difficult class, but I know it's been rewarding for many students. And if they want to specifically, say, for example, go to an art school or an arts program, they're going to need to develop their portfolio during high school, which AP Studio Art allows them to do that. Sometimes students in arts are looking at summer conservatory programs, so programs in dance or programs that would also help them develop their portfolio. I'm not sure with COVID this year what the plan is, but there is a program called National Portfolio Day. Sometimes it's a couple of days where they do where students will go to certain art schools and have their portfolios looked at by admissions people in various art programs. So they get feedback in order to make their portfolios stronger. And if you don't know what you want to do, which many PCS students don't want to do, which is fine. I guess the undergraduate degree programs in the United States are set up for students to kind of do some exploration. So it's fine if your student doesn't know what they want to do, especially this early on. They're 9th and 10th grade. They have plenty of time to think about it. But we have the PCS Alumni Mentor Network. So former PCS students who are, adults working out in the world, who you can reach out to if you have questions about a certain field. With them, you'd likely be doing informational interviews, or you can just do that with someone that you know, like as a parent, someone that you know, your child can do an informational interview where they can ask someone questions about their job. A lot of students try to find out or narrow down what they want to do by doing different community service programs or taking different classes. Like, for example, at PCS, we don't have psychology. So sometimes students will take, say, psychology or anthropology or sociology at Cabrillo to kind of narrow down their major interests. And also we have a career survey in SCORE, which I'll talk about a little bit later, that allows students to kind of take a test to determine what may be major interests for them and career possibilities as well.
One thing I'd also like to add in is, if you're not aware, the graduation requirement from PCS is a minimum of 5 AP classes. And sorry, my camera's off because of my unstable internet. But you know, many students take more than 5. Some can get as high as 8 or 9 or 10. And then what that can allow, and Maya, you can, if I'm speaking incorrectly here, what that can potentially make beneficial for the student is that they can almost enter college as a sophomore.
Yes.
If the college they go to accepts the AP credits, assuming that the student does the class and takes and passes the AP exam, they basically can do their freshman year in college while they're at PCS by taking an abundance of AP classes. And we always want our students to really go after what interests them. And that speaks to these 2 slides, like especially the artist, or what if I don't know? Because, you know, we can't expect 15-year-olds to know what they want to do for the rest of their life. But it's always good to explore and take classes that seem interesting. In the chat, there was, what is the capstone? And that's a project that kids can do over the course of 1 or 2 years. It counts as a class, but it's not a class that they attend on a regular basis. They meet one-on-one with an advisor, and then they have a mentor. They typically would do a research paper and a presentation, but it's really all about what the kid is interested in. So it makes it pretty much a wide open scope of possibilities. Am I frozen?
No, I think Maya's frozen.
I think oh, did we lose her? Let's see. We did lose her. Keep talking, Todd.
I will. I don't know the answer about the alumni mentor network, if that's a searchable database. I believe it is.
It is a searchable database that the students have access to. It isn't something that we have access to. And I believe, someone to correct me if I'm wrong, it's on SCORE, which Maya will be talking about.
Yeah, and yes, I can explain the capstone again, since we lost Maya. So the capstone is it's a project-based class, so to speak. And basically a student would come up with an idea, like for example, one project we had, a student wrote and directed a play. And it was performed for PCS families. And then there was a Q&A afterwards to talk about the whole process of what the student went through and the support that they got from their advisor on campus, and then who did they work with outside, because typically you have a mentor on the outside that helps guide you through the process. We've had, there's so many. I've been an advisor for a student that made a snowboard and a student that made a surfboard. If you're familiar with Ventana surfboards, a student made a board like that and worked with a board maker. So it can be really anything that is of interest to the student, and then the advisor will guide them through that. And she's back.
Yes. Got kicked off there for a second.
Welcome back.
Okay. Let me do this. Okay.
I think it was the previous slide you hadn't quite finished on.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was finished with what I had to say on this
Okay.
one as well.
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay. So SCORE, not spelled standard spelling, but SCOIR, SCORE, is what PCS uses for college research and to manage the college process. And I also mentioned U-Science earlier, which is where students take the career profile. All students at PCS can have a SCORE account. I actually put in everybody starting 9th grade, and they can actually sign up now for their SCORE account. If they search their email for SCORE, so SCOIR, the invitation should pop up. But if your student needs another invitation, I can resend that quickly as well. So there you can do career exploration. That's where U-Science comes in. SCORE is also where students do their college visits. So if, for example, if a school, say, UC Santa Barbara wants to visit PCS, they have the option to do either a virtual visit, which is mainly what's been going on since the pandemic and as well as this school year, or they can do an in-person visit, which is kind of the original standard that we had pre-pandemic, where they would come to the school. Usually they're in my office and the admissions rep talks to the students who are interested in a specific school. And they would sign up for that through SCORE, as well as the admissions reps themselves. They make a request in SCORE and then are added to the PCS college visit calendar. Students who are, researching colleges, particularly this happens starting towards the end of junior year, but can happen earlier. They can do things like virtual tours in SCORE. And so a virtual tour looks like where they have a pre-recorded video where it's like a camera that's like giving you a 3D view of a school. So they have that option. There's also still some stats in SCORE with, what stats about the college. So like the population, admit rate, things like that. And we also have something interesting. We have the scattergram in SCORE, which is based on data from previous PCS students who applied to certain colleges. So for example, say on the top part of the scattergram, it's GPA, the side it's test score. So you can kind of see where you land in terms of other PCS students who have either gotten admitted, denied, or waitlisted. Oh, and I guess I should also add, we also have the 4-year plan in student SCORE profile. And that's where I tend to go to update, classes for junior year and senior year for their 4-year plan. Okay. So I'll just introduce you quickly to the Common App. This is something that you don't have to worry about right now until, ideally senior year. There's tons of colleges on the Common App. It's mostly private schools and then out-of-state public schools, but not all colleges are on the Common App. There's over 600 colleges that are on the Common Application, and they're mainly some of the most applied to colleges in the country, as well as a few Canadian schools. The Common Application has an essay. That would be the personal statement at 650 words maximum. And it can be edited or swapped out even after you've applied to a few schools. So for example, students who apply early action or early decision, they may make changes to their essay if they would like. And there's also an additional information section if you don't feel that the application has enough space to explain your situation. So there's additional 650 words that you can use. Most students don't use the additional information section, but this would be a place to talk about, if you were affected by the CZU fires or your family was strongly affected by COVID. That'd be something that you can mention here if you didn't mention it either in your essay, your main essay, the personal statement, or in your supplemental essays, which are another part of the Common App. So there isn't just one, but sometimes there can be, one or multiple supplemental essays requiring the Common App. It can run from just a few questions, like why our school, or something more specific, or it can just be, checking some boxes off. And some schools don't have supplements at all. It just varies school to school, but they do. On the Common App, students have to list their activities, so activities, awards, things like that. Unlike the UC application, where they don't really have as much of a limit, they're limited to 10 activities. And I recommend students list their activities in the ranking in terms of maybe what's important to them, or either time spent on an activity. Additional component of the application are teacher letters of recommendation, as well as the counselor recommendation, which again isn't required for all schools, but many schools do require a counselor recommendation, which is something that I write. The last component of an application, especially on the score end of things that I submit, are the school profile and secondary school report, which basically just says, what the student's GPA is, and kind of what they're taking a little bit of. It's not the most important part of the application, but schools definitely do look at the school profile, which is something that's online. I've recently updated the school profile, so that should be coming up on the school website soon. Okay. Any questions or anything? I feel like that was a lot of information. Anyone? Okay.
I guess I'm just wondering, is the Common App something that is going to be used in conjunction with the application, or is it something that is in lieu of other application? I mean, I'm just thinking back to when I did applications. And I'm not,
So
just wanted to clarify.
the Common App is the application itself. So
It is
say,
the app,
for
okay.
example, you're applying to, USC, you would use the Common App to apply to USC.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Some schools will
you.
have their own applications. So sometimes, like, for example, I think MIT has their own application, but most students use the Common App.
Okay.
For like most other schools. Any other questions?
Oh, there's a relevant question in the chat about this.
Sure.
Whether, do you really only start working on this in your senior year, or are there items to do ahead of time?
We'll talk about a little bit about that. So things to prepare for for applying to college, but actually opening up the application and entering in information, that's August 1st of basically senior year. Because the Common App and the UC application open on August 1st, and the CSU application opens on October 1st. So you really can't do anything until that time in an actual application, but of course you're preparing for college and preparing for this your entire time in high school.
Okay, and then there's a question about score and whether you can take the interest test more than once. I think I know the answer to that is no, right?
Yeah, it's no.
Yeah. And that's why, if I'm not mistaken, it's important to wait. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would wait till junior year.
Okay.
They have access to it, they're beginning their junior year, but I think I'll start encouraging students to take it by the end of junior year.
Okay, another question that just came up is whether 9th grade grades count.
Depends on where you're applying. But obviously, when evaluating applications, they see your 9th grade grades. But for the CSUs and UCs, they're looking at your A through G requirement classes for 10th and 11th grade.
What is an what is A through G?
So A through G are the academic requirements to enter a UC or CSU. So I don't have off the top of my head what different subjects are, which letters, but it's, a language other than English, science, math, history, English, and then there's also electives as well. So those are kind of the A through G requirements. Just by fulfilling the PCS requirements, you're fulfilling the A through G requirements. So there's no need to really worry about fulfilling those. A lot of high schools have their requirements that just automatically meet the A through G requirements.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, but it's definitely like private schools will count 9th grade as part of your GPA and what they consider for your admission. Even, UCs and CSUs, like we see what was taken in 9th grade, it's just not counted towards your GPA that they evaluate you on. But we're looking at 9th grade, seeing kind of what you did. We know what you'll be taking in 12th grade because, you enter in the classes that you're taking that year on your college applications. And then specifically for a lot of private schools, they have what are called mid-year reports, where that's something that I submit on the student's behalf after first semester grades have posted, because they want to make sure that, you're keeping up with your rigor and that you're still continuing to get good grades or kind of maintaining your performance. Yes, anything else?
Okay, well, all of this is way in the future. Let's get back to now.
Yes.
That's your next slide.
Yes. I talked a little bit about UCs already. So four personal insight questions, a max of 350 words each. The same essays go to all campuses, and students self-report on for the UCs and CSUs. The CSU application, for example, has no essays. Students self-report their test scores and grades, which means that they just enter those things on their applications and they don't submit their transcript directly to those universities, and they don't submit their SAT scores or score reports. That would be done after they actually decide to enroll at a certain school. So there's more than just college admissions to getting into college, and just to be a well-rounded student who's a healthy, well-rounded student. Students are learning about self-management, like how many classes can I handle and still, get to sleep and have time to be with your friends. Students are starting to develop, self-awareness. Part of, deciding what major you want to go into and doing community service is kind of deciding, being aware of themselves as an individual, not just, a student at school, but who they are going to be in society. It's important for them to do responsible decision making, so not getting into trouble or getting suspended. For example, the Common App typically had a question about, whether or not you've been suspended or expelled or anything, or had any disciplinary issues, which they've removed this year, but some colleges will ask about that specifically. Students are also, during this time, they're building their relationship skills. So they're, not just, relationships that they're having with other students, but, building rapport with their peers and their teachers. And that's important to, getting those letters of recommendation later on. And then also just social awareness. So are they aware of what maybe some of their peers are going through? Do they think about, others and what others' lives may look like and how that's different from them and their place in society? Okay, anything to add? Anyone? Okay. Okay, so let's go over a few myths about the college process. one would be that colleges don't know how hard PCS is, which is false. Part of that is, it gets debunked in the school profile. So they get to see that 5 APs are required versus, at another school where APs aren't required and taking 5 APs looks, great. But PCS taking only 5 AP classes, you're just kind of doing what's required. And they also know that, what the average SAT scores are and the classes that students tend to take at PCS. Another myth is that they have to take the hardest classes possible, which again, isn't true. Some students may feel the need to push themselves in math, even if they're more of a humanities person. And I would say, sure, if you're really interested in math, do that. But then otherwise, it's fine just to take, some students just are fine with taking AP statistics instead of pushing themselves into calculus, which is fine if you're, you want to be a psychology major, because statistics will be important in that and not calculus. Students, for example, like sometimes if they don't do well, they'll have to end up making up a class. So rather than kind of push a demanding schedule on themselves, I recommend students kind of balance out their courses or try to take maybe another AP course 10th grade if possible, to balance out their schedule later in their junior and senior years. One bad grade won't kill your chances. And bad grade is relative to a lot of students. Some students see that as getting a B, some students see that as getting a C, some students see that as, failing. But PCS students do have the opportunity to make up a class if they get a below a 70%. In fact, it's required if it's a class that's required to graduate, so they can do credit recovery. Or, say sometimes like if they take a class at a community college and it's not what they want, that won't necessarily tank their application. I mean, not everybody is applying to like Harvard and Yale. I mean, quite the contrary. Most students are often staying in state or either applying to school on the West Coast. And there's a lot of flexibility. Not all colleges want a 4.0. Some of it, a 3.0, and that's fine. Another thing to, think about and not overload yourself on are activities. Not all students need to, be president of every club, but it's good to participate and build up those community service hours and think about, what you're doing for others. And also remembering that you can only put 10 activities on your common application anyways. So it's good for students to just kind of think about, especially in 9th and 10th grade, what are their interests? What do they want to focus on? And remember that can also always change as well. Activities don't necessarily have to be structured to count for college. So for example, if you have to take care of your siblings, like that's an activity that I recommend students put on their application. Or if they're helping their family take care of a sick or elderly family member, that's an activity, not a traditional activity in the college context, but that's definitely something that, tells a full picture of a student and what their experience is, and maybe explains why some of their test scores aren't as high as they'd like, or their GPA isn't quite as high. Another myth is that students have to go to a quote unquote good college to have a meaningful life, which isn't necessarily true. Like most students don't go to top universities and they do just fine in life. I think the thing that matters is once you get to a school, what do you make of it? Like, are you making those connections in college? Are you doing internships? Are you maybe taking different electives while you're in college and maybe thinking about, oh, maybe I'll do art, but I'll also do business as well, or do psychology and maybe biology. Of course, students don't have to double major, but just kind of thinking about how are they going to actually use their time in college once they're there. And then, because ultimately the goal is to be able to get a job and support themselves? Because I'm guessing that not all of you want to support your children for the rest of their lives. So anyone have any questions?
Well, I was going to say, and there's nothing wrong with community college either.
Yes, definitely. Cabrillo has great programs. One of the things I recommend to a lot of students, if they don't necessarily want to go through the stress of the college process, is go to Cabrillo, and especially if they can do the honors program at Cabrillo, which you have to have a 3.5 from high school or get a 3.3 your first semester at Cabrillo. You can enter the honors program there, and they have very high acceptance rates to UCs, where, you know, for example, UCLA is like a 12% acceptance rate as a freshman, but if you're applying as a transfer from Cabrillo honors program, that can be as high as 60 something percent. So the world is their oyster, and there's plenty of options, and they can do well. And it doesn't matter if they're going to, you know, even like Northeastern or Harvard or, you know, Berkeley. Yes, any relevant questions or anything?
Yeah, there's in the chat, a parent asked, I've heard that many colleges are de-emphasizing APs, yet PCS really focuses on them. Have you seen a shift on how, or have you seen a shift, or how are they perceived right now? That's a good question.
The thing is, like, basically, even on a more global scale, APs are considered the American curriculum. Just like how, you know, in China, they have their system. In the UK, they have their A levels. APs are kind of seen as the American system. And
The top tier is what you're saying, right?
Sorry, what?
Tier system. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like, I think what you're saying is APs are seen as like the highest level in the American system.
Yes, because a lot of times in college, if you're applying abroad, they want to see AP scores. Because, for example, like schools in the UK, they'll say, oh, you have to get, you know, a 4 or 5 on this AP exam to qualify for admission. So it's kind of the way that I guess students are kind of judged on a more global scale, but nationally, there are other options. That's not necessarily at PCS. I mean, there's IB classes as well for the IB diploma. Some colleges or some high schools are moving away from AP and creating their own more honors or rigorous curriculum because they don't necessarily want to teach to a test, which I think is definitely a pitfall of the AP system. And also that you don't go very in depth with APs. It's mainly a pretty broad stroke of a certain subject versus, for example, IB, in which you go more in depth. But yeah, I mean, some schools may be moving away from AP at the high school level, but overall, it's kind of the dominant curriculum in the US. Okay.
I think we can move on.
Right. So questions. You can throw all the questions at me.
Open mic, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Sure.
You mentioned, thanks so much. That was really nice. That was great. That schools come to PCS for interview sessions, or now they're doing it virtually.
Yeah, for the college visits, yes.
Are you supposed to be a junior when you attend those, or can kids start, if they're interested, looking at those sooner?
I mean, I usually just advertise it to juniors and seniors. That's when they're kind of seriously considering colleges at that point. Oftentimes it's a lot of seniors that come to those, but juniors are also invited as well. For freshmen and sophomores, I just recommend kind of focusing on becoming a better student or developing your activities. because you will have plenty of time. I mean, half of high school will be focused on the college process. So, I mean, they can, if they drop in, I'm not going to turn them away, but in terms of actually registering, that even the missions officers themselves are expecting to talk to juniors and seniors.
Thanks.
That's a great question. Okay, so I think in the chat there is a question. Sorry, I lost the question. So a parent asks, and this parent is a professor, what's the one thing you wish our kids knew that would help them in this process?
I just responded in the chat. There's over 3,000 schools out there. Don't go for the name brand school. Always don't think that, oh, I'm at PCS, therefore I should be in any and all UCs and Stanford and blah, blah, blah. Look for what school would fit what your child is looking for. And the sooner you start just looking, and you know, tailoring it to your child's interests, you know, I mean, so I know when I took my kids on college tours, so much of it was when we took them to campuses, it was like, huh, this one definitely, I don't see myself here, but this one, I like the feel of this place.
Great. What about you, Maya? Anything to add to that?
Not really. That's the answer.
Right. Okay. Consensus is great. Other questions? For sure, I see a few here in the chat that kind of in different areas. First,
So there's one about, sorry.
Yeah, please, you go.
There's one about if they fail an AP class. So the way our system is set up is, so we just finished a grading period, and I'm not sure if grades were posted today or not, but the grading period grades they're not important. I mean, they are, but they're not like something that's going to go on a transcript. It's the semester grades that matter the most, because those go on transcripts. So when you see your child's transcript, there'll be semester 1 and semester 2. So if a student doesn't pass a class in one semester, it really depends on the class. So I'm going to use math as an example, because math has such an unusual format, the way they do it. If you don't pass the first semester, you could still pass the whole year. If you do really well the second semester, they will go back and change your first semester grade. Now that's just math. Otherwise, you would have to retake that class, ideally on your own time, because you don't want to retake it at PCS, because you're basically filling that slot with a class you could be taking, but you can't because you have to make it up. So ideally, we recommend it you take it over the summer, and we suggest some online platforms that are A through G approved, because all of our classes are A through G approved. And the student just has to finish it before graduation on their own time.
Yeah. And ideally, I'm not hounding them their senior year to make up a class from sophomore year.
Yeah.
I just generally recommend just getting it done.
Yeah.
I know for AP US, some students have done grade contracts where they do some work to help their grade, but usually it's like students who are kind of like on the cusp of passing who do that. Otherwise, there's, you know, Silicon Valley High School, BYU Independent Study, Flex Online High School. So there's different, or UC Scout, different options that students can do to make up credit.
Okay, I have another question. This comes from the RSVP questions, which is if our child wants to apply internationally, are there things they should be doing now? And are there resources that can help guide and support us in the process?
Well, it depends on where. I'm more familiar with the UK and Canada. But there's also, I mean, students can apply to Australia. New Zealand's a little bit harder to do. Ideally, you're getting an IB diploma for New Zealand, but students can definitely go to, say, Australia. Even their cost of college is much lower. So even as an international student, those fees can be the cost of a UC. So that is something to think about, especially if they have a connection to that country. But most students who are considering international are looking at the UK and Canada. I have experience guiding students with some of the Canadian applications. I haven't visited Europe, but I am familiar with the UCAS, which is basically the common app of the UK. So some students have been applying to this year Oxford and Cambridge and London School of Economics. So I'm somewhat familiar with those. And we have a couple of students applying to schools in Canada. That looks a little different. They don't necessarily have a common app like the UK or the US. They have it based on providence. So there's a BC application, an Ontario application. McGill University in Montreal has its own application. So it kind of varies based on providence for Canada. But it's varied and confusing, just like America, I would say, in some cases.
Sorry for that. In guiding those students this year who are applying to those international universities, are there things that they could have started to do when they were in 9th or 10th grade? Obviously, it's going to be school specific, but in general, is there anything that's so different than it is here in terms of preparing earlier for international applications? Or is it all kind of geared towards building your resume and then preparing your junior year and applying your senior year?
Not super different, but countries abroad are a little bit more focused on testing than even the United States. So they'll care more about what your SAT is and what your AP scores are, versus in the United States, they're not necessarily evaluating you based on your AP scores, but the UK in particular, because they're based on the A levels usually, and you have to get certain scores to qualify for certain programs. So they are going to look at, are you getting a 5 in biology if you're applying to a medical school program and things like that, versus in the United States, you kind of start with more of a blank slate in terms of applying to different programs. Like it's not direct entry like it would be in the UK, which is only 3 years of college versus 4. Canada is still 4 years as well. But I wouldn't say there's anything very different. Just kind of like I was talking about earlier, I would focus your coursework. I would definitely make sure to do that if you're applying to something more competitive like engineering or computer science or law or anything like that. Just make sure that you're focusing your curriculum, versus in the United States, it's not as critical, but a good thing to do.
Well, that's really good, important to know. So basically, if you do want to apply internationally, really the focus on making sure that your test scores are as high as they can be and that your grades are as high as they can be is really important.
Yeah, because kind of the whole clubs and activities, that's kind of more of an American thing.
Okay. All right. Okay. Another question is related to timing of meeting with either or both of you. So should I, well, actually there's 2 questions here in one. Why don't I just read it? When should my kid meet with you, Maiya or Todd? They have very specific goals about what they want to study and where they'd like to apply. So that's the first part of the question. And the second part is, should I be looking for outside consulting to help guide my kid, or is the support coming from PCS, or is this support coming from PCS and it's not necessary to get outside help?
I would say we do plenty of support at PCS. We even have a junior and senior seminar where I talk about the college process. Currently in the senior seminar, we're basically just working on applications because they really need that time, and it's time for them to ask me questions while they're at school. And I mean, I'm doing things like this, and students are free to book an appointment with me. Usually that starts junior year because I'm the advisor for 10th and 11th grade.
11th
But,
is rough.
or sorry, 11th, 12th, sorry. 11th and 12th grade. But yeah, I'm willing to talk to someone earlier if they have something more specific in mind, but the college talk doesn't really start until 11th grade. I'm sure Todd would like to see some of his advisees instead of having to chase them down if necessary, but.
Yeah, so there was a slide earlier that showed, like, if you wanted to be a doctor or an engineer, like specifically which classes to take at PCS to solidify your track in those areas. So you'd want to meet with me. So what's going to happen is in January, we're going to be doing course selections for next school year.
Mhm.
So I'm going to be reminding kids about the 4-year plans that they have. And parents have already been emailing me those so they can start planning about what classes do they want to take in 10th and 11th grade to make their path. If they know what they want to do, great. You know, I can give them more guidance for sure. But also to make sure that they're in a good path, on a good path right now in the current school year. You know, you want to make sure you're doing well and taking advantage of all the support that we have available in school. And then I'm always happy to meet with students to plan for the following year and looking down the road, because the 4-year plan, you know, goes all the way through senior year. I don't give students editing rights, and there's a reason for that. They're free to make a copy and make their own. But the one that I send out, because I use that and I drop that into score for kids when they're in 11th grade, or that's about when, is that right, Maiya? When they're 11th grade, we put that thing in score.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure most students know where my office is. If not, I'm in the library. I've moved my office. They can always email me to make an appointment with me. I'm happy to meet, and parents, you're always invited to be part of that if you'd like as well.
Yes, and I use Calendly. It's a calendaring app, and I just give students my link, and then they have access to my calendar where they can book appointments. They can book them in 15, 30, or 60-minute increments.
Okay.
Hey, Maiya, can I ask a quick question about activities?
Sure.
I've heard you bring that up a couple of times, and you sort of hear horror stories about kids doing activities that they're not particularly passionate about, just to have a nice sort of CV for college. And I'm just wondering what kind of advice you have about getting kids engaged in sort of authentic activities.
To go with their interests, because that's going to be the most authentic. Like, are they into music? Not only do they maybe want to do that PCS, they can join a youth symphony like in Santa Cruz, or, you know, an activity would be a sport. Like, are they interested in that? Maybe they want to do multiple sports, or maybe a student wants to do things across different areas because they have a wide range of interests. I have run into kids who don't seem to have interests, and that's where I definitely recommend community service to kind of see where those interests lie, or, you know, try something with a friend and see if they like it.
Thank you.
Great question. Okay, so going here to the chat, Todd, are there any questions here you want to address?
Yes, Jennifer Lane posted one. Looking to the changing landscape regarding the importance of test scores, are there certain areas outside of school, full-time job, volunteering, sports, wide range of experiences that are becoming more influential in college acceptance?
I think they're looking more at grades and test scores, or not test scores, sorry, grades and rigor right now. Colleges do know that, activities were affected by the pandemic. Like I mentioned earlier, students can't volunteer at like hospitals or anything like that at the moment. They know that, community service activities may have been cut. So they are looking at activities, but they realize that there may be gaps in that as well. And they're looking, I would say, grades, rigor, and essays, I think, matter even more at this point. So how strong of an essay are they writing? Are they, really conveying their story and talking about themselves in a way that makes admissions kind of interested and understand them? Or, are they not putting in the effort as much? Because I remember one time I read application for Irvine, and the student wrote like a few sentences for their PIQs instead of the actual, like, maybe 2 to 3 paragraphs of room that they have. So you can't treat it like a short answer. It is kind of a longer answer.
Okay, I'm going to just go through a few questions here that I don't think have been answered in the chat, which is, how can students be exposed to scholarship opportunities?
I actually post them on the bulletin board. That's one of the things on my to-do list, is to actually send them out. I just got on an email list for scholarships, so I should get like a weekly newsletter. I think I want to try to add that to the Monday newsletter as well. But I actually already posted a list of scholarships on the bulletin board at the top of the stairs. So there's a college bulletin board where I post, different posters for visits or college programs or summer programs. And I also post scholarships there as well. It's right next to the community service board, where the students can also search for community service opportunities there as well.
Great. And does PCS have resources to find interesting summer opportunities?
That's one of the things I do want to set up for PCS. Basically like a database of some sort of programs that students can do. At the moment, a lot of students, there isn't as much activity, but students have been able to find things like, sometimes they'll do online classes, or like a MOOC, like a mass online class, or they do like surfing or hiking or just different activities that they're interested in. There are summer programs that can be quite expensive, because students can do things like take classes at Georgetown, or take a class at like maybe UCLA over the summer. So that's an option, and there are structured programs for high school students for that, but those tend to be on the pricey end of things.
But do you, as a reader of college applications, do you have a preference about reading a application that does a great job of describing one of those, like taking a course at where did you just say?
Georgetown or
Georgetown.
UCLA.
Or also great that talks about working at the boardwalk. I mean, in other words, getting a job versus taking more classes over the summer.
I don't look at that as better. One requires more privilege, I would say. Like, you have to have the money to be able to pay for those programs, versus working at the boardwalk, which doesn't necessarily mean you're low income or anything, but it's something that's a little bit more attainable. So I don't necessarily want to, I guess, kind of discriminate with, different activities. Students, have the ability to do what they can. And I take that into consideration. Like, for example, if a student's busy taking care of family members or their younger siblings, I understand why they wouldn't have as many activities.
Okay.
One thing I would also say is, the old adage, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Connections. I would encourage students to talk to teachers. Use your parents, use the people that in your life to help set your kids up with internships and whatever. Because it's always amazing how, oh, I knew someone that did this, and then all of a sudden you get someone involved, and you know, an amazing opportunity all of a sudden is spawned from that.
Yeah, exactly. That's definitely a good way to get internships, especially in high school, because so many internships they want college students.
All right, another question on back to testing is asking, do you feel Kaplan, other SAT preps are worth it these days, given the growing test blind?
Depends on the student. Like if they respond well to being a classroom environment and they, they're already a pretty good test taker and they want to get their score higher, that I do see value in doing test prep. But obviously it's not for everyone. Like if you, don't feel like you want to have testing as part of your application, then there's not as much of a point in spending $1,000 on test prep.
Okay.
Yeah, and some students, prefer in-person classes or online classes, which tend to be a little bit cheaper.
Okay, what to do? I don't understand that question. Do you see any other questions, Todd, that haven't been addressed? Oh, I had one from the RSVP questions that was good.
Mhm.
Well, they're all good, but that I thought would be helpful. It is, if there are 3 things a freshman, a 9th grader could do this year to prep for going to college, what would they be?
Yeah, I was reading that question earlier. I was like, "Ooh, that's a good one."
Yeah.
So I would say developing their skills for self-advocacy, because some students do really struggle with that. So being able to speak up when they have a question or when they don't understand something, just be willing to speak up about that, or either be willing to, use that tutorial time to go to different teachers and start. I mean, even though teachers in 9th and 10th grade aren't necessarily going to be writing your recommendations, it's good to start building that rapport with your teachers, because you will need to do that, especially later on in high school for your recommendations. Practice, get sleep, which I think is underrated in terms of this whole process. Like, okay, you're doing all these things, but can you function? So just developing good habits that allow you to get good sleep and then also maintain your grades. So maybe you don't take all the hardest classes possible, but you take courses that are maybe slightly more difficult in areas of interest. And I guess just kind of finding out what they like to do in terms of like just starting their community service, because PCS does have a 20-hour per year requirement. So it's good to kind of get on that early.
Great.
There's a question about, is there opportunities to hear from professionals / parents to share their careers? So we used to do a career day, but COVID has kind of made that way more challenging. So we haven't done that in 2 years now, but it's been a thing in the past that we've done. We do a career day. I do know that this year I saw that Math Science Day is going to happen. And that will be one opportunity where parents / professionals in the math and science field will come in and focus on how math and science is relevant in the work that they do and the job opportunities and potential for that.
Yeah, I guess one thing I would add on to that is to do your math homework, because it builds upon previous skills that you've had, and then it's hard when you get behind and then you're struggling the following year as well. So that's one thing I would recommend, especially if you're interested in STEM fields. So do your math homework.